The City of Ocean Shores Planning Commission meeting to order. It's Tuesday, April 22nd, 2025, in the Ocean Shores Library, Point Brown Avenue in Ocean Shores, Washington. Roll call, please. Commissioner Bees.
Here.
Commissioner Bricker.
Here.
Commissioner Johnson.
Here.
Commissioner Kern.
Here.
Commissioner Lawless is here. Commissioner Peterson.
Here.
Commissioner Ward is not here. May I have a motion to excuse Commissioner Ward from the meeting today?
I so move. Second.
Second. And all in favor?
Aye.
Agenda. May I have a motion to approve the meeting agenda?
So move.
So move.
Second.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Approved. Approval of minutes from our regular City of Ocean Shores Planning Commission meeting that was held on 8 April 2025. Do I have a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Approved. Now I'll open it up for public communication. Anyone in the house have something to say? Nothing? Anyone from afar have something to say before I do? Oh, yes, Vita.
Hi, thanks, Mark. Thanks for having me. I just want to wish everybody a happy Earth Day. 55
Yes.
years ago, April 22nd, 1970. That's it for now.
Okay, thank
Thank
you.
you.
Jane, do you have anything for us?
Yes, I do. Can you hear me?
We can hear you now.
Okay. Well, good afternoon. I just got done listening to the last meeting because I couldn't attend via Zoom on that one. And I just want to express some concerns about the trapping ordinance and going over that. I don't want to downplay anybody's property damage, of course, but I think that what Scott Harris brought up is education is a big thing, seeing if there's ways of preventing the damage. But I think opening trapping up here and, we need to be very careful that a homeowner or any resident could just pick up the phone and say, hey, I need this animal trapped. It did some damage to my property. Where are the guidelines for what's considered nuisance? I think I brought that up before. Who determines what is a nuisance from the damage being done? What I would like to see done, though, since there is obviously things going on that aren't affecting everybody but are affecting certain property owners, is that maybe we, instead of changing the ordinance, put into where you're allowed to get a special permit in cases like this, where there's severe damage or the animal has become a nuisance, and to where it goes through specific steps and processes before someone can just come out and trap an animal without any checks and balances on it. So that's about all I have on that, and thank you very much.
Thanks, Jane. And what you just said about a process is exactly how we are trying to proceed in this regard. What I'd like to do is, we did receive a public comment. Vita, you submitted a public comment for us. I'll just read it for the record. Please keep the no trapping in ocean shores ordinance on the books. If the city allows trapping to meet what's allowed in state law, it will incur liability for the actions of persons who may or may not get the appropriate state trapping license. I believe the intent of the state rule applies to agriculture or commercial claims against wildlife damage, not residential properties. See RCW 77.36.010, number 7, for the definition of owner, which excludes residential property owners. My comment to the Ocean Shores Citizen on 8 April 2025 Planning Commission meeting: a few flower pots, a damaged dock piling, or a few felled trees really aren't eligible for compensation. Neither are claims that could be covered under insurance. See RCW 77.36.110, number 3. The city needs to think twice about taking on the liability to appease a few picky residents. The city should enforce its "don't feed the wildlife" rules first. Regarding beaver relocations, state law also makes the hunter provide for the beaver's relocation habitat, among other things. I don't think folks will be willing to do that. I say no trapping in ocean shores. We need to learn to live with our furry neighbors and mitigate our property to minimize wildlife-human interactions. Respectfully, Vita, Ocean Shores resident. Thank you, Vita. It's on the record now.
Thank you, Mark, for reading that.
Okay, anybody else have anything? No? Okay. Well, we'll move on to our old business, roofing and metal fasteners. So that is covered in Ocean Shores Municipal Code 17.50.210. We've gone back and forth on this one. Marshall provided some further guidance since our last meeting. I think I've sent it out to everyone. Marshall, any thoughts?
Well, I intended to get back into this code before the meeting to provide some clarification. Dan and I both struggled with similar language when we talk about the different types of structures that would be allowed or not allowed to have the exposed fastener metal siding or roofing. What I was hoping to do was to get the metal definitions, or the prescriptive method of where we can use it and where we can't, split up into the roofing and its particular conditions that would be allowed, and into the siding and its particular areas and conditions that would be allowed. And I think what happened is I feel like I had too many words in the language, but it's important that we separate between the 200 square foot accessory structures that are allowed without permits, because those seem to present the most, they're the most problematic, because those can be imported in on the weekend without any permits legally. They just have to abide by the current code, in which case they don't in a lot of cases. So, I put a bunch of stuff in there that talked about unpermitted structures, less than 200 square feet. Permitted structures, we talked about carports and boat covers over 200 square feet requiring a building permit, but being allowed to use exposed metal fasteners. And I think I just got too much in there, and I would prefer to go back, shake this out again, and try to provide a little bit more clarity. Now, if you guys want to do it in the meeting, we can attempt that, but it's probably, if you guys want to read through it and just give me maybe some suggestions, or tell me if maybe I'm not as bad as I thought I was when I wrote this, I'm open to whatever the group would like to do.
Well, let's look at what's been written and see if there's any concern or changes that we can make. So this is 17.50.210. The first one is H3, and we've got that we've already approved, but there is an addition. Exposed fastener, ribbed or architectural metal roofing is not permitted for any structure larger than 200 square feet. That was approved by us in February. But in addition to that is exposed fastener, ribbed or architectural metal roofing is permitted for structures of less than 200 square feet. Now, does that make any sense?
Yeah, that divides. So the reason I added the that is permitted for structures of less than 200 square feet. And this is one of those places where we, on the roofing, I may need to revise this because we do have carports and gazebos that are in excess of 200 square feet that would require a permit and would allow exposed metal fasteners based on the discussions we've had in the group. So in my quest to divide the line between the 200 square foot, we can do it less than, and we can't do it more than, once I got through the code and was doing another kind of a read through, I saw that I had, basically in this first section that we're looking at here, prohibited the use of exposed fastener metal roofing on a gazebo or a boat or car shed. So, there's one thing that's going to have to be revised.
Okay. So later on, we're looking at adding definitions to 17.50 that will cover awnings, canopies, and connexes or shipping containers.
Right.
So if we go to I3, all permitted structures on the property must be in keeping with the home's architectural design and finishes. And then J1, wood or wood style insulated lap or architectural metal siding is required on primary structures and permitted accessory structures. Architectural or ribbed metal siding is permitted for outbuildings, unpermitted structures less than 200 square feet. Permitted carports, boat covers over 200 square feet. Period.
And I think that was the language that Dan and I both had difficulty reading it.
Okay.
And I mean, if you read it for what it actually says with the commas in their current positions, it's just that it seems like a run-on sentence. It feels like a run-on sentence when we read it. So
A little
I'd
cleanup.
like to clean that up and break it down to where, and this is where there's a conflict and we're down in the exterior finishes. We're no longer talking about roofing. Now we're talking about siding,
Siding.
Right.
So,
one thing I did want some clarification on these tubular framed or wood framed canopies that they use for boat covers and car covers. We're talking about allowing, at least in the current language, we're talking about allowing exposed fastener metal siding on those particular structures. And then also we added the limitation of 50% of the wall coverage on any primary structures or detached garages over 200 square feet. Or those would be accessory structures over 200 square feet. I use the term garages, and if the group feels like we do not want to identify specifically a garage, because you can call a structure a garage, it doesn't mean it's a garage. A storage building could also be over 200 square feet and permitted in the residential zones. I think a lot of the difference would be the size of the opening on the street side of the structure, if there's a specific definition given. Do we want the canopies, carports, and boat covers to allow more than, typically what I'm seeing today is a wrap that comes down 25% of the wall, maybe 50% in some cases. Do we want to allow or propose that the entire wall be allowed to be metal exposed fastener siding in these cases where it's a gazebo, a canopy, a carport, or a boat cover? That would not include garages or primary structures. Just these auxiliary type structures for basically they're a rain shield. And by definition, that is a canopy. And I think my copy of this, I don't know if I got it to Mark or not. In J1, down at the bottom where we're talking about unpermitted structures less than 200 square feet, permitted canopies, carports, boat covers over 200 square feet. So the canopy will be defined later in our discussion.
So how is it gonna stand? I understand for rain protection, how's that gonna work with wind?
Yeah, and that's why I'm asking a question. I mean, is it understood that these things could potentially have a wall covering that goes all the way to the ground? Or do we want to limit that exposed, do we want to limit them to, if they're gonna put a wall covering on it, make them go with wood or lap or other type, or even exposed or unexposed or snap tight lock, unexposed fasteners?
Commissioners, any
You
thoughts?
guys have a thought on that?
I think appearance wise, if it was the boat cover types, appearance wise, the metal top and the metal sides are more attractive than having dual siding with different type roofing. And with the elements we have down here, I don't care what you put on it, because the one right down the street there on Point Brown Avenue.
Yeah.
That's a prime example of a failure because of Mother Nature. In the 24/7, we have elements that really doesn't make a difference what we put on it. And that didn't have siding down the side I don't think it had down very far, did it?
Might have been 25%.
Yeah,
The one
and
that
it was
was-
just enough to, at the age of it,
Right.
collapse it.
Those structures, now that particular structure that we're discussing now was over 200 square feet, I believe, in size and would have required permitting, and had it been permitted, may have had engineering requirements that would have prevented the failure. So,
Yeah.
so that's one of the things that we're trying, I mean, that structure does not fall into code
No,
until you get to the building code. So what we're trying to do is outline where exactly we're gonna shove this type of structure in the code for engineering and whatnot.
I guess my question would be, are you going down the side? What if somebody goes down the side, now then they go down the ends? That's a complete building.
Yeah, I know. That's why I'm asking, do we want to limit on canopies? Do we want to limit the amount of wall that can be installed on a canopy?
it's not uncommon to have 3 sides all the way down.
Yeah, does that fit the definition of a canopy? And that's something that we might get back with Roy, because I think we're using the definition out of the building code for a canopy. And I can't remember off the top of my head what it said.
I'll interject because I just brought it.
Okay, great.
So canopy, a permanent structure or architectural projection of rigid construction over which a covering is attached that provides weather protection, identity, or decoration. A canopy is permitted to be structurally independent or supported by attachment to a building on one or more sides.
So if it's attached to a building that you can't have exposed metal fasteners, do you want to have exposed metal fasteners on the canopy?
That's the question.
So this falls into one of our unintended consequences if we aren't careful.
Well, that's why I'm not in a hurry to get this thing shoved through and try to implement it. I want to make sure that we've covered all the bases and we have, you know, what you guys have discussed with community members, the intent of the community in how these get applied.
And there's different between wood, a stick frame and a metal, aluminum frame or metal frame one. There's a different layout and there's a different pattern of how it's made prior to putting the metal on it too.
Right, and that would all fall under the structural engineering that is required, you know, for the ones that are over the 200 square feet. Once it gets over 200 square feet, then engineering will be required. And however that metal, whether it's a metal tubular frame or a wood stick built frame, there will be requirements in engineering that will provide for the structural stability of the canopy.
So I think we need to go back and rework this. Any other comments by commissioners to be considered before the rework? No. So Marshall, I think we need to go back and take,
Sorry that I put as much time as I could find into it this week, and it just wasn't enough. And
It's only 30 hours in that day. I get it. Okay, so we'll move on to the next one. Update to Ocean Shores Municipal Code 17.50.110, Section E, which is on page 8 of our agenda. And the only change we're looking to make on non-accessory structures, standards and applications is in E, the exterior wall surface of non-accessory sheds shall be constructed of non-metallic wood-like appearance, wood, vinyl, and or resin.
So this particular code change kind of addresses what we just finished up talking about in J, as far as what type of a siding would be permitted on these non-accessory sheds. So the non-accessory sheds, meaning a shed 120 square feet or less on an unimproved lot. So that's what this is talking about. This is this would prohibit metal sided sheds in the residential zones.
Okay. Any comments from commissioners?
Well, what I think just said was on a where there's not a home built.
Yeah.
They couldn't have metal siding on the shed,
Right.
but if you have a home on it, you can have metal siding on the shed.
Well, that's yet to be determined. And that's one of those things. Do we want to have this code apply to 200 square foot sheds on developed lots as accessory structures? Do we want to prevent metal siding on those as well?
Or do we want to be consistent?
I think that
I think
would
it would
be
be
consistent.
So no metal on accessory structures in that 200 square foot or less. So a shed on a property with a house, we want to have a wood or lap type siding, no metal siding, as well as on an undeveloped lot, it would be no metal siding. Is that the direction you want to go, or was it the other way to allow metal siding on the undeveloped properties?
It depends upon what kind of shed you're putting on the property, either one of those old hickory or whatever. They come with wood siding for the most part that I've seen. And do they actually sell them? A small shed you can put on your property that is metal, like back in the
Yeah,
70s?
yeah, you can get
A lot of
either.
them are plastic
Yeah.
though nowadays. Plastic sheds.
Yeah, so if you were stick building it, you could end up with either. And my guess is if you don't prohibit it, it will happen.
Yeah,
And that's what, and I can see that happening because there's an economy in metal siding that, will push people to at least consider that. So if we want to prohibit it, this is the time to do that. And I don't have a preference one way or another.
Again, the change in E would be the exterior wall surface of non-accessory sheds shall be constructed of non-metallic wood-like appearance. And that's what we've added. Wood, vinyl, and or resin. So what we added was non-metallic wood-like appearance. Well, maybe we should hold off on this one and tie them together as well.
Yeah. So I think we can frame this, at least so that I understand it correctly. When we talk about roofing, the only thing that's going to be allowed to have an exposed metal fastener roof is going to be a shed 200 square feet or less, or a uninhabited permitted structure, over 200 square feet. And that covers the canopy, the boat cover, and the carport. When we get to the siding, we are not going to allow metal siding as a non-accessory structure do we, and we're gonna carry that same, so no metal siding. For 200 square feet or less. Or 120 or less in the on an undeveloped where it's a non-accessory. I'm trying to get, when I look at a set of plans, I want to look at a wall and say, yep, allowed, no, not allowed, yep, allowed, no, not allowed, and try and get that to where we have it written fairly simply, so somebody can look at our code and not have to, have a Harvard degree to interpret it.
And that's the goal, right? Is to
Yeah,
complete-
to keep it as simple as.
Clear
we
it
can,
up.
but there are some distinctions that we need to make based on some definitions, which has clouded my ability to read things clearly, so.
Okay.
Apologize for that, but.
So we'll look at that one. The next one is on our agenda is the additions to definitions, municipal code 17.50 on page 9. That I just referenced, that based on the discussion of these items, when Roy was in the meeting that we were having, we thought it would be good to add these definitions into 17.50 because they're not there. And that's the awnings, canopy, and the intermodal shipping containers or connexes. Awnings, an architectural projection that provides weather protection, identity, or decoration, and is partially or wholly supported building which is attached. An awning is composed of a lightweight structure over which a covering is attached. So that's the definition out of the building code of an awning. The canopy we just went over. A permanent structure or architectural projection of rigid construction over which a covering is attached that provides weather protection, identity, or decoration. A canopy is permitted to be structurally independent or supported by attachment to a building on one or more sides. And the intermodal shipping containers or connexes is a 6-sided steel unit originally constructed as a general cargo container used for the transit of goods and materials. And one of the things that we talked about is we've got to decide if we're going to allow connexes in residential areas, which I don't think there's anybody that really wants them in residential areas, or B1 and B2. That's what they're zoned for. But now there are provisions, as we've discussed, to have a connex or shipping container during construction in the residential area. Marshall, am I correct?
Yeah, that's kind of what we agreed on, and the enforcement to that is we would not final or provide certificates of occupancy to a new house until the container has been removed. So that we don't end up with somebody trying to pull a move on us there.
So with these definitions, do I have a motion to approve the addition of these 3 that are in the building code to 17.50?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Pass. Okay, the next item on the agenda is trapping in ocean shores. Dan, would you like to take this, please?
Yeah, I want to start by saying a few words before we get going on. We must remember that the document presented for trapping is only a draft. And its intent is to start the conversation on what to do with trapping. what are goals for trapping ordinance? Give landowners options if they fear for life safety or have property damage from fur-bearing animals such as bear, raccoons, or beavers. We need to make the process to conform with Washington state law, simple to understand, and efficient process. Compensation for destruction of property damage is not included in this ordinance. And I was interested, I went out MRSC, and I put in trapping. There is no reference to trapping in MRSC, which means that other jurisdictions use the RCWs to rule what's going on. So you got to ask the question, why does Ocean Shores, why doesn't Ocean Shores just limit it to trapping ordinance and rely on RCWs? That's my question. So since what I drafted, I've made a few changes. So I've been reading it. So I don't know how you guys want to, I think at the beginning, 80-20-100 should be allowed. And I removed council. I said the city recognizes that practice of trapping in animals is very hazardous to our area where families reside and business is carried on. And declares that this policy of the city to allow trapping within the city limits for wildlife threatening human safety and causing property damage. Then 80-20.110 is from 77-36.030. Not verbatim because I broke it up into sections and added to it. And the only thing I changed there's from what you have is in two of the last sentence, contact with a licensed wildlife control operator. And then in 4, I changed in the second line, causing property damage on that property. And I took out without I put fulfilled license required underneath, and I took out 7732.410 and put 7765.460 or is authorized director under 7712.4. Okay. And then in 80-20-120, unlawful, any person who hunts except as outlined in 80-20.110 fur-bearing animals. Okay. So I need comments.
Yeah, commissioners, any comments on this? I do have a few when everyone else is done. Any thoughts?
I assume that one of your comments is gonna be that it'll be paid for by the person requesting the trapping.
Right. Yeah. Any other thoughts?
Just gotta educate the public on what they can do and can't do.
Yeah. But definitely for sure. So my thoughts are our goals should be very specific as to what can be done by whom when we write this. Right now, in Ocean Shores, the words are, there'll be no trapping whatsoever. So there's no gray area here in Ocean Shores. We had Scott Harrison last meeting, and he would not be upset, or he's inclined for us to move closer to the RCW. But that doesn't mean adopt wholly the RCW. So how might this look when we get to that point? So as I was reading through it and doing some looking, I think it's important that we're not just going to allow any Ocean Shores resident to go out and trap any animal. That's not the intent whatsoever. However, if someone has if they're in danger of harm, if their property has been damaged, what do? Right now, they can't do anything. And that doesn't, to me, that just doesn't seem right. We should be able to provide them some options. But we need to provide guidance along with those options. So if we go down the path that, okay, you're an owner and you are either been injured or your property's been damaged, what do? Well, then you can contact animal control. And under the current wording, it's called the public safety officer. But as I spoke to the chief of police, she goes, that's me. Okay. So animal control works for the chief of police. So if we go, an owner can contact animal control. She'll certainly be read into that. Then an assessment will be done. Animal control can then contact the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife, if appropriate, for their assessment, who can then contact a licensed wildlife control operator to come and do the business that has been decided needs to be done. The cost of that will be by the owner of the property or who's been injured in some way by our furry friends. That way, there's no liability to the city in any way, but it provides the community with a way to deal with this issue, whereas right now it is none whatsoever in the code. Any thoughts?
Were you saying that, the proposed verbiage would be that trapping would only be allowed by somebody certified or licensed?
Yeah, but as the guy from the department last week said, they have what they call wildlife control operators.
Right.
And I'd add the word license. So this city resident cannot do that. It has to be somebody that's licensed and recognized by the state.
So right now, it's prohibited whatsoever is the wording. There's no black and white, no gray here at all. So if we come down and propose something along this line, there is an avenue for a resident to get some satisfaction, but we're not just gonna go at it, because that just would not be good on so many levels. We don't have enough time to talk about what disaster could occur. But I think providing step-by-step situation for an owner, and the owner needs to know that if it's determined that the licensed wildlife control officer comes out, they bear the cost of that removal of our furry friend. Yes.
Who's going to enforce this?
Well, the owner can call the animal control.
But who's going to, I mean, are we putting more, I won't call it liability, but are we putting more in the basket for the animal control officer, patrolman, are gonna stop and say, do you have a permit for this? Or if a neighbor calls and says, my little girl's got her foot in a trap, and the guy doesn't have, didn't go through the proper steps to do it. I assume because it's in the city code, or that it releases the city of any,
Yeah, there's two things. One, if they go out and do it on their own, they've broken the law.
right?
Okay. Secondly, as Scott said, last meeting, that if he decides, that he's in an area looking, he contacts the chief of police currently here in Ocean Shores to decide what to do with that. And so animal control works for the chief of police. And so that would be an avenue for a community member to take some action.
So basically, it would behoove us, I would think, as a city, if we do approve something like this, we need to do something to make the public very aware of what's going on.
Absolutely. And as Tom said, education's going to be the key.
Exactly.
So,
That's just my comment.
yeah, so whatever we decide here clearly has to go through council, right? To be
And beavers
approved.
have been an issue in Ocean Shores as long as I've been down here, and that's since the early eighties, and it's probably only in specific areas that there's a beaver issue.
I've seen it all over the fresh waterways, you know, depending on what you consider an issue. They've plugged culverts from one end of town to the other, so
I had one,
they're all over.
I had mine, plugged, right after I bought here. The neighbors were trying to deal with it. Not real successfully, I might add, but, because they really couldn't do anything because their hands were tied. So anyway, this will provide an opportunity if we do so, for residents to deal with property damage or physical damage. And right now, there's not that on the books for them. Please.
I'm trying to remember, when was the stated prohibition put into effect?
I believe it was 76, if I remember correctly.
Because in that last meeting and then other discussions since this topic came up, there has been trapping. I mean, they talked about relocating and trapping beavers for years.
Right.
And multiple. And I'm guessing while the ordinance was in effect, so how, it wasn't just like, well, on a case by case, did they just say because it was Fish and Wildlife that did it or whatever? I just didn't know if that was the.
Let me just answer it this way. Yes, it has been done. Yes, it was being done. And once it was identified, they were told to cease and desist. So I'll just leave it in those broad terms.
Okay.
Yeah, but you're exactly right. It was being done. So anyway, I just think it's, I know there's no trapping whatsoever for anything. It's whether or not we want to provide at some point through some mechanism, an avenue for members of the community to take care of things that may occur.
And you, go ahead.
Go ahead, Steve.
Well, it's certainly better than not being able to trap at all. But it seems like just an observation. It's not an immediate remedy for the homeowner. And as this proposed process gets before the eyes of more and more residents, I would imagine, there would be a growing backlog, given we're not talking about increasing staff. This would be handled by people who already have jobs. Sure. It would be adding it on. So it could at that point become a very lengthy process.
It could, but let's remember that not every incident is going to cause action. So as an owner, I call and I say, I've got a problem with a beaver and it's flooding my house. So in this case, if this was passed, I would call animal control and they come out and go, oh, there's a problem. Then that would allow animal control to then go on to the next step, which would be to contact Department of Fish and Wildlife. I think is what I've got, right? Yeah. And then Department of Fish and Wildlife come out and go, that's a problem. Or that's not really a problem, okay? And then it would go away, right? It's got to be a problem throughout the entire process
Right.
for activity to occur, in my mind, anyway. So there'd be several eyes on it once an owner asks for assistance. I don't know, just my thought.
And then there's other mitigations as they brought up, and it's actually on their website. Showing, oh, we've got beaver harming your trees or bushes, well, here's a way to keep them away from it, Maybe
Right.
have different descriptions of other mitigations besides trapping and relegating the animal. So,
You use the example of a beaver who caused water to go into your home.
Mhm.
I assume a basement. Well, that is something that, where you would want a rapid response,
Right.
depending on how serious the problem is.
But as, using that as an owner right now, who do I call? Ghostbusters? I mean, there's nothing, I mean, I could call and request some assistance, but there's nothing in the code giving me,
Yeah.
some way to get remediation. I mean, I'm not looking for compensation because that's not gonna happen, but to fix the issue anyway. Yeah. So that's exactly what was happening. It was starting to flood in the culvert at mine and the neighbor's house. And remediation needed to be done. But the neighbors were already on it.
Just a side note here, I actually had a gentleman, I do the garage sale laws. And I had a gentleman come in and purchase from the garage sale an aluminum boat that somebody had donated to it. And he is part of a group of people in this area that are breaking up beaver dams. And they've been doing it with kayaks for quite a while. And so now they're out there now they've got a boat to do it. So I'm just saying there are people that are aware of it.
Of the issues, sure. Right. And as long as they're not trapping them, they're not. causing,
Exactly, and it has nothing to do with, it's
committing
just.
crime, right? Right. Anything else?
I would say that, my observation, living in this community now for 2 years is that we live or die on culverts.
Yeah.
I mean,
Definitely.
when this place was designed, they made that the main way to deal with water.
Yeah. It's really important that you've got free flowing culverts. That's true.
And the public has to be made understood that if we change it to where they're gonna allow trapping, the bureaucracy takes time. And the steps to go through to get what you want isn't gonna happen overnight.
Right. But at least if we're successful moving forward, there'll be something in place for an owner to
As
do.
long as you have a licensed and bonded trapper to do the job, that'll do it as so-called per code.
Right.
And we can evaluate that, as time goes on and we have more and more data. How frequent it is, how.
Marshall's gonna need something to do after he retires here, so that's.
I trapped beaver as a kid.
There you go. Dan, anything else? You've done a lot of hard work on this.
Yes.
Just looking for input.
Well, did you get some input?
Mhm.
Okay, good. All right, so we'll have that back on the next agenda, and maybe we can come up with something to take to council. We'll see. Okay, the next thing is under new business, Ocean Shores Municipal Code 15.24.020, wiring methods and materials, adding F to that particular code that says, when replaced, meter sockets must be stainless steel. It's pretty short, but pretty cut and dried there. Any thoughts? Marshall, do you have any thoughts on that? I know it's something that Roy had mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, in maintaining, services to the public works facilities for, 27 years, that was one of the main, we found that, because that is your main incoming power to provide service, and they degrade at a fairly rapid rate out here. They're all exposed to the elements, and You know, even the good hot dip galvanized ones don't cut the mustard. You're gonna get 10 or 15 years and then you're gonna end up with a bunch of frosty interior parts on them and then the potential for failure. So when I build my new house, it will include a stainless steel meter socket.
Your second. We have a motion to approve for that addition to Ocean Shores Municipal Code 15.24.020.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So done. Thank you very much. Okay, a couple of items for discussion. I've been following some bills in the Washington legislature. And interestingly enough, there's been some movement. The first one, Senate Bill 5184 on parking mandates. I mentioned last meeting that Oregon had done away with parking mandates. There was a bill passed. It's on its way to the governor. But those mandates in that particular bill only apply to communities of 30,000 population or more. So we won't be forced to do those things, but some of the concepts were interesting about parking instead of 1.5 in commercial. It was like 1, only requiring in residential 1/2 a parking spot. I don't know how you do that, but 1/2 a parking spot in residential areas. But we will not have to deal with that unless we want to, because of our population is less than 30,000. The next one is House Bill 1183, Building Code Development Reform passed. It's on the governor's desk. And I could not, Dan and I were talking about this before. It says this applies to communities under RCW 36.70 alpha 0.040. And I read through that bill twice. And I tell you, that's nice. And even when I went to the RCW, I couldn't tell whether it applied to us or not. I don't think so, because I think it's those cities under the Growth Management Act that are going to be hit with those changes. But anyway, they referenced RCW 36.70A 0.040 as those that will have to deal with this reform. And then there's 2 others I was tracking. Senate Bill 5576, providing local government option for the funding of essential affordable housing programs. It's passed the Senate, it's in the House. We'll see what that looks like. And House Bill 1763, providing state funding for essential affordable housing programs. It's in the House. So that's what I've got for an update in Olympia. Any thoughts? Yes.
So SB 5576, is that also a state ordinance?
Yes, yeah, it's a Senate bill. It's
Oh, Senate bill, right?
Yeah, Senate bill. Passed the Senate, it's in the House.
Thank you.
Any thoughts on those bills? Okay, next thing we have is Community Development Liaison Report. Marshall, anything for us today?
Nope, I don't think so. Nothing that would probably pertain to planning.
Okay, super. Any planning commissioner member reports at all? Any reports from commissioners? The only thing I have to add is the sign recommendation that we worked on last fall is being presented at City Council tonight. So it's included in the City Council agenda. It's page 11 through 69. So there's a lot of information there to include our recommendation that we put forth. I think it was in February when we finally passed it here and sent it forward. Okay, I'll open it back up to public communication. Any comments? No. Any comments from afar? Oh, I'm sorry.
I just got one
Sure, please.
question, I guess, about, I represent the Beavers.
Okay, good. You're from Oregon, right? Oregon State? Yeah, gotcha.
Okay. Actually, I used to run the electric boat company down here, and we ran electric boats all around and ran all over the country. And I only once or twice that I have a problem with a beaver. And what they were doing, they were pulling the logs out into the waterway, and I run into that. But I got that mediated because I found out where they lived. And they got an eviction notice, so I took care of that. So I really never had many problems with beaver because there's not a lot of running water that they would get into. And I didn't realize that they were still a problem because I thought they pretty well left town and went back to Oregon, you know?
I catch them. They went to Corvallis where the Beavers are, right? Yeah.
In all seriousness, I think it's a thing that we gotta be aware of, but I'm not sure we need to do much about it.
But we did have, community members come and presented pictures of damage, that they had to their property. And, asked if we would look into that. And hence, we're still working through the process.
Yeah, yeah. And the dam is not the problem so much as it is, they love certain kinds of trees, you know? They love those, particularly when you plant them, so I'm not sure about the dam problem,
Gotcha.
in more ways than one.
Appreciate that. Yeah. Thank you very much. Any comments from afar? Vita, yes, please.
Hi, I do have a couple of comments. Getting back to the metal siding. I really think this should be in chapter 15. And looking at the canopies or the carports that would have 3 sides on them. And I know you guys already approved the definition, but I think you jumped the gun on that because where you're talking about an attachment to a building, that's gonna bring in the building code. So those definitions came from Appendix H of the IBC, the International Building Code. And here's where you're gonna run into a problem, which is what Marshall brought up. When you get into these structural things where you found that failure on Ocean Shores Boulevard or wherever it was, these things, these projects need to be addressed through the building code. And I think it's misguided to be in chapter 17. And there's a lot of stuff in 17 that belongs in 15, but I'll leave that there. So the definitions that you have come from Appendix H in the IBC. Regarding the Connex boxes, and I couldn't find the definition of Connex in the code, but that's fine. It sounded like it was pretty good. But the thing I want to point out to you guys is that where you talked about not allowing them in the residential areas, here again, you're going to get into a problem because you've got people, you're allowing pyramid zoning, and that is the city's main #1 problem. That could be solved. I mean, you already have, you would have non-conforming uses already, but that one day is gonna have to be addressed. And the point I'm trying to make here on the B1 and B2 zoning, there are a lot of people that have built single-family residences there. So if you're gonna say that you can't have Connex in residential areas, you're gonna have a hard time defining that and making it so that Marshall can enforce the code. So you really need to think about that pyramid zoning, and that should be #1 priority, in my opinion. On the trapping subject, anybody, so if you look, anybody is eligible to get a trapping license. And if you look at the definition that I put in my comments, it could be the owner of the property, or immediate family member, a tenant, meaning a crop tenant for commercial or agricultural uses, or an employee. Those licenses require that the person have a training course and a certification. And that's the piece of paper that you're gonna wanna look for. The other thing is, and here's where it's gonna get back to my comment about liability against the city. Why are you even involving the animal control officer? That's gonna be the draw. That's gonna be the nexus of the liability part of this. Where if the animal control officer makes an improper judgment as to whether there is damage or not, that's gonna be where the city's gonna get drawn in. Why can't the person just contact Fish and Wildlife directly? And again, one thing I do want to say, I say it, I'm against trapping, but I recognize that there has to be a remedy for people. So I appreciate what you're doing, and I encourage you to keep on with finding that remedy. But I don't think you should be drawing in the animal control officer. So there's ways of doing this to just have it directly from the property owner being affected and the Department of Fish and Wildlife. Then I want to talk about electrical wiring. Yes, I agree that it needs to be stainless, but your thing that you approved, your language, and you may want to think about not approving or recommending these until, you know, people have a chance to chat about it or maybe bring it back for the second time. I would encourage you to add to what you just approved that it has to be marine grade stainless, because marine grade stainless has molybdenum in it, and it's specifically designed to withstand the corrosion that we see in our environment. So as you guys all know, there's lots of different grades of stainless, and you need to be real specific in that language. And that's why I am objecting to you approving it before you've kind of either gotten your comments like I'm giving you, or you may see after people get to view your video, that other people may have more knowledge than I do about this. So thanks again for allowing me to comment, and happy Earth Day.
Thank you. Jane, do you have anything for us?
Yeah, I just wanted to finish up commenting on the trapping. I really think we need to just leave it as it is with no trapping and go forward with steps for homeowners that are having a problem. And agree with Vita on the local animal control should not be involved. This is definitely Fish and Wildlife. This is their grounds. This is not necessarily an animal control's purview as far as with all the wildlife we have here. Yeah, once again, I would like to see that trapping in place and left there, and given homeowners specific avenues that they can take, work with Fish and Wildlife. And if there is an issue that arises, have a special permit that can be gotten to help take care of the situation. So that's it. Thank you. And you guys have a wonderful afternoon.
Thanks, Jane. And for Jane and Vita, I'll just mention what Scott Harris told us at our last meeting is when he gets a request like that in the code, he's required to contact the public safety officer here in Ocean Shores, which happens to be the police chief. So, I mean, I've communicated with the police chief. Well, actually, I communicated on who's the public safety officer. And no one seemed to know. And the police chief came back to me and said, oh, that's me. So what he told us is they're in communication anyway, because right now they can't trap without approval because the code says none whatsoever. Anyway, I just wanted to provide that feedback. Yeah, Vita, you have one more thing.
Yeah, and so those are the points that need to be changed in the code.
Right.
The no whatsoever. What it needs to say is that, and then you outline the process of where you take it to the Fish and Wildlife folks. But I just wanted to point out that anybody there in the audience can get, it's a commercial trapper's license, not a recreational license. And, you know, you just have to go through the training. And certainly the property owner is eligible to become a licensed trapper. So, thank you.
Well, yeah, thank you. Okay. Our next meeting will be Tuesday, 13 May 2025 at 2 p.m. here in the Ocean Shores Library. Secretary will be Thorne. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? We are adjourned at 3:05.